I'm calling this meeting of the Hood River County Budget Committee for fiscal year 2026 to order. Are there any conflicts or potential conflicts of interest that any of the members of the committee would like to share, reveal, disclose, talk about?
Would this be in addition to what we disclosed last?
I believe so. Anything in addition to what we disclosed last time? We've got our agenda, public comment discussing our packet. Are there any other items that members of the committee would like to add or remove from the agenda?
Is there just a time for general discussion?
Yeah, basically what we've got is general discussion of the packet and the ideas from last time. Of course, we'll entertain any motions or action items people want to put forward. So nothing there. All right. Public comment. Is anyone here who would like to provide public comment to the committee?
No one online.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I guess we'll start with presentation from staff regards the requested deliverables and attachments from the last meeting. And then we'll discuss and see if we have any action items coming from that.
So there were a lot and we were a little disorganized, and you have my apologies for that. I have a handout of what I did receive electronically. Would anybody like a handout of that? Okay. But you can't have them, can I tell them why? He broke his foot.
Oh, no.
Well, running his marathon this week. Yeah.
Did you finish anyway?
17 miles in.
Did you finish anyway?
He didn't even know it was.
That's hard. Yeah.
I didn't think it was broken. I probably not. I was willing to electronic.
Tuesday with his foot and an ice bucket.
It's terrible to laugh, but it's kind of, it's the perfect way to break your foot.
PDPR.
What's that?
PDPR.
No, I was far from my goal.
I was
I was pretty disappointed until I found out it was broken, and I eased the burden a little bit.
Anybody else want a copy?
I made one. I made one, yeah.
Second thing is, this is the PERS. I was asked about it by Chris. I did check the website again. They do it for 2 years forward, and I did tell you that, I think, and so we were good with the numbers, but this last 2 years was done October 24. And it goes through this budget that you have in front of you to approve. The next 2 years, I'm assuming will come out around October 2026. But I did pass these out last year, but it just. But I do all that at my dad's and get in home. Oh, we have this too. This is bigger than oh, I have one. Thank you.
We're going to put those stuff for that.
And this, the one thing that was promised on Monday was done first, I think. Missed the packet somehow yesterday, so this is what page 21 might look like if it had projected ending balances in it. We didn't want to yield out for a data set, so it's the middle column there.
Thank you.
We didn't want to change the budget document. You can see the results of the projected ending balances by the director. By looking at the beginning balances in the budget, we're all here to talk about and approve. But I get it. I would have wanted to see it too. So there it is. You know that one too? Keep it. I think that's all I had. Those 3 things.
So it's middle column that you added, the general fund year-end estimates for 25, 26.
Like added that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And just so you know that comes from a whole different data set, because those numbers don't go into Cassell. So there's
Right.
kind of some problems. If
So
we want to
they
actually
line up
incorporate
with-
that into the document, there's more to talk about if that would ever go actually in the document. So it was requested as a data request, and that's how it's presented. It's just an additional handout.
And did you prepare it before or after you were on pain meds?
No,
No.
I don't have big meds, so no worries there.
He
Great,
said it was constant pain, but tolerable.
excellent.
All right. Is there anything else that you all want to share with us related to the request of the packet?
If you want me to go over the Q and A, we can, if everyone's had time to read through it and don't have any explanation or questions on it.
I have specific questions on a bunch of
Okay.
stuff, but.
Okay.
I don't know.
Does anyone have questions specific around the Q and A document?
And we would
Chris does
identify.
too, okay. Anyone else have any questions related to the Q and A document specifically? Okay. Maybe we could tackle that first with Chris, and if Arthur, you have any questions on that one?
I think I'm more on the other documents. I don't think they're on the Q and A.
Okay, Chris, you want to go ahead with your questions? Thanks.
Yeah. So the first one, Sherry, was about the other funds that hold reserves that are unrestricted. When I look at the audit. they have
I'm sorry,
reserves-
Chris, I can't hear you.
Whoops.
Okay.
I came up in yellows. So when I look at the audit, there's reserve funds that are loaned with the general fund. And it looks like, help me out here if I'm wrong, that they're probably Fund 302, Public Works Asset Replacement, and Fund 315, Capital Projects. Is it fair to say that those are reserve funds that are available for general fund use?
They are not available for general fund use.
Only in the fact that we've artificially segregated them into another fund, but when I look at the activity in them, it's all transfers to and from other funds. There is no independent revenue.
Well, and the 302 fund is a fund of public works, so significantly road fund, which statutorily is segregated from general fund use. So funds that are created from road fund, revenue sources are statutorily required to be used for those purposes and can.
It is correct that the 302 and 202 are integrated the way you're saying. Just not to the general fund. So the 302 is the asset fund of the 202 fund. They're one in the same pot of money, just we separate them into a capital replacement fund, but it's road funds and road funds. So they are related in that way, but not for the general.
And I would note that any of the department directors, we've got them all here, so there's a good question.
Well, let me see, another look at that in a second. You can hold us out.
Chris, are you questions about the degree to which you would think of these as reserves?
Yeah.
Because I have a whole bunch of questions on that same subject, so.
If there's funds that are holding reserves that aren't restricted, then it seems to me that you can look at them holistically as part of the general fund puzzle.
Right. And so
So
the,
that's what I'm after.
and so the 315 fund, we have that memo from Clayton. Very colorful memo, which talks to that, and I took issue with some of the things there, so that's what I wanted to talk about, so.
Let's follow up with this whole question then before we move on.
Oh, because you don't mind me
Yeah, thank you.
jumping in, so, I'm sorry, what's the title of the 315 fund? Is that vehicle replacement or?
And it has a building as well, so like in there, I think it's just capital, but yeah, I mean, it's referred to as the vehicle replacement fund, but I don't think that's
Okay. So my understanding is that on the vehicle replacement side of things, the way that it works is effectively that as the vehicles depreciate, we put money into this fund so that when the vehicle needs to be replaced, we have cash available to replace it, and the expenditure doesn't happen all in 1 year. So basically, we know we will have to replace every vehicle, so we're spreading the cost of it, we're spreading the expenditure over multiple years. And so I don't view that as a reserve. I view that as, as an accounting mechanism to make sure that we always have available funds and we spread them over time to replace our vehicles. And I was wondering I was really hoping that you would jump on this, because from an accounting point of view, I'm trying to understand what was Clayton trying to get at. So I was thinking if maybe the two of you could explain to me why you're viewing it differently.
Maybe I can throw in so the 2223, we keep referring to it as a reserve policy. It's a fiscal sustainability policy, which is very similar to reserves. It discusses reserves, but it also discusses capital. There was a 301 fund, and that's what it refers to directly in there, as well as the timber deposit interest fund, as things that could shore up the budget in the short term until the point where it's supposed to be standing on its own with these plans. And so the 301 fund was fully depleted. It transfers into the general fund. It's now down to zero. It did all of that.
Right.
And so that's not the capital fund. I think people sometimes confuse that might be the same capital fund as the one that we have. The one that we have now is the one that's on an actual schedule. I think that we discussed in the last meeting that the other capital fund was just kind of a hodgepodge of different funds, monies. Nobody really knew which fund it was, and it didn't have a schedule. And then the last administrator and the last public works director set up a schedule. There are some issues with it still because some vehicles didn't go onto that in the first place, and some reasonably and rightfully so. Some of them we were less clear about the reasons, and then there's some other issues with it. But the 2223 is not a reserve policy, it's a fiscal sustainability policy. And one of the things in 2223 is to save for future capital things, such as vehicles, which wasn't being done, and such as building. And so in my PowerPoint presentation, I was saying, if the resolution is saying we're needing to be saving certain amounts of money to do these things, then the 2223 rightfully ought to be considered. I know that people prefer not to look at it that way. That's management discretion. I totally understand, but it was, and mostly still is, all general fund dollars. There's less than, I think there's like $39,000 just recently within the last 3 years that have come from outside the general fund. Almost all of that money is general fund dollars for that general fund purpose for fiscal sustainability to achieve 2223. So when I think about it, are we achieving that? In my mind, that's part of that calculus.
Right.
And but I understand that commissioners and management would prefer to not view it that way. That's what my presentation was saying last year, and this is just last year's presentation. So these numbers don't line up to current.
They didn't.
Yeah, so this is all the budget numbers and everything in there is from last year. This is the same presentation. It was just re-handed out again as a reminder.
My idea, because the questions that came up were very relevant to his presentation.
Great. But just to be sure which one you're talking about, when you talk about the fund that has a schedule associated with it, that's the 315 fund.
Correct.
Now.
Yep.
Right, okay.
Vehicle spreadsheet.
Right. When we finish with this, I'd like to give a little more history on the 2223, because I think parts of it you got right and parts of it you got wrong, in my opinion. So we'll talk about that.
Well, I'm okay. I mean, it's basically what it amounts to is that the general fund is paying as capital outlay for building improvements, vehicles and vehicles and other smaller stuff. It's paying for by transferring the money to an asset replacement fund. Right. That's what. Okay. Thanks.
But Chris, do you view this? Do you view the 315 as part of the reserves? Do you agree with Clayton's opinion on that?
If I remember when I didn't print the asset replacement schedule that he sent me in Excel, but I remember adding it up, and the 315 was paying for, I think, vehicles and improvements, right? Yeah. So again, if we just remember that general fund is only paying directly for buildings.
Right.
Well,
And these other transfers to other funds are paying for vehicles.
And I consider it,
Half dozen, 1/6 of the other.
I consider it restricted because there are specific purchases identified. For
Right.
it, so that's been our discussion
Yeah.
as well.
And
Yeah.
that- so you're kind of saying what I said.
Yeah,
Okay.
she's saying what you're saying, we understand, and I'm not saying that that's not right. But it does say in the 2223 about how we're going to stack up money for, gives an example of $750,000 for 4 years, and then in the fifth year, 750,000 in, and another 750,000 out. You can't spend money out of unappropriated in fund balance, and you can't spend money out of contingency. You have to move it, and if you already know that you're going to schedule to spend that, it just goes in the budget. So
I think you may have
315 kind of had to
misread
be designed to do that. So, and you also can't accumulate money across multiple fiscal years in those are budget accounts. So they're going to reset to a balanced budget every year. So we can't really accumulate and track how much money has been contributed over fiscal years if it were to stay in the general fund. So if somebody rightfully decided, let's literally move this, so then you can literally track it year to year to year, and you can literally build the balance separately. And so it is, in my opinion, accomplishing what's set out right there.
I understand, but I think you misread part of the resolution. I'll get to that in a minute. But in terms of the purpose of reserves, I think we sort of have to go back one level to look at it from the management point of view. The purpose of reserves, I understand too. Number one is the cash flow, because there's uneven tax collection and expenses don't get expended evenly through the year. So we always have to have some amount of cash available as the expenses and revenues slosh back and forth. But the second is for being able to respond to a change in what, people would call business climate and in other environments. There could be a surge in inflation, some non-recurring event that causes a significant non-payment of taxes, basically to smooth out economic cycles that you want to have some money there. And I don't understand how the depreciation, which is something that we know we're going to spend, I don't see how that provides revenues for that economic climate smoothing function. So maybe I'm viewing this differently than other people view the purpose of the reserves, but I think that's where I start.
I agree with that 100%, but I think the memos and minutes I saw around that was that we weren't doing that. And so while it makes complete sense that we would think that way, we weren't doing
You're
that.
talking about 2223.
Yeah,
So I think you totally took that out of context because and which is natural because there's not a good context stated. What was happening was at the time that was written, I spent a lot of time consulting with the commissioners on this. That was when they realized we're in deep, whatever, and we got to do something to make sure that we don't have zero because we're spending every penny we can find in every corner. And we have to have a policy in place to figure out what is our goal and how do we get out of this.
Yeah.
We've been kicking the can down the road year after year after year. And now we're at a point where there's no more, where we can see the end of the road. So let's define the end of the road so that we say that we're going out to the public, we're going to ask for funds. If they don't give us funds, then we're taking action of cutting, staff cutting, functions that we deliver. And so this was trying to put some specifics to what those processes look like. And section 2 was saying, normally you wouldn't be allowed to touch the timber, I always get these words in the wrong order, timber interest deposit fund, timber deposit interest fund. Normally you wouldn't be allowed to touch this, but we've already been doing it. We don't have any other place to get money from. So we're going to keep doing this. But we're recognizing that it's almost at zero. We took a fund that was at many millions of dollars and we spent it down so that there's very little left and we can see the end of the road. So we're saying that we're giving you 3 years within which you can find another source of revenue and we're letting you spend those funds over these 3 years. And this is how you divide it out because this is how much is left. And if we reach spitting distance of zero, we're cutting off that. We're not letting you force that to zero because there are no other reserves anyplace. And we're forcing you to, at that point, take expenditure side actions, you're gonna have to cut functions, you're going to have to lay off staff. And so that was the predicate to the whole, to the levy process. And I don't view this as a meaningful, there are the pieces where it talks about reserve, but in terms of being an actual reserve policy, to me, this was more of a policy of how bad are we gonna let things go policy. And they did have the reserve comments in it, and I forget even what the numbers were, but what, 8% minimum, 15% maximum, or
Six,
something like that.
goes to 10 after X number of years.
Right, starts at
Six
6 for the first 3 years, and then
Hopefully get it.
we said we want 10. I don't view that as a reserve policy. And if this is really the only reserve policy we have, then I'd say that we should actually put a formal reserve policy in place. This is inadequate.
And I feel like this is also, with the vehicle fund, the way that it is, it's not really operating in that way anymore. So
Right.
like, it needs to be brushed up, but I agree 100%. It's
Right.
out of date at best.
So anyway, yeah, so that's what I think that whole resolution is about. And I wouldn't draw upon it as the wisdom to help us in this moment to figure out what good policy would be. They were very much flailing, and this was, let's define the end game on this flailing.
Thing.
Yeah.
Fair.
Well, then,
That's really helpful.
to me, it sounds like we need a better reserve policy
Absolutely.
for the next few years looking forward. Sounds like we don't quite have that in place now. And that would be very helpful.
Yeah, so correct me if I'm wrong, but that would be something that the Board of Commissioners would do in regular course of business. And in the past, what we've done is we've consulted with the Budget Committee, we've brought them in, invited them to come and talk to us as part of that. So in terms of, we don't have to do that for completing this budget, but we all should have in mind, though, that's really the subject of this of the discussion that we started talking about last week, was what are we comfortable with in reserves? Are we comfortable spending the reserves down? And if so, at what rate? So while there isn't the policy in place, I think we're kind of verifying that it's our problem to figure it out.
It does
Is the
seem like
Baker
there's-
Tilly analysis part of that at all? Will they recommend reserve policies to us?
I don't know, if it would be a formal reserve policy. We can request that as a part of it. I mean, they're doing a fiscal sustainability analysis, so they're gonna identify what is reasonable. And I think it would provide the basis for development.
Writing policies is part of their most recent amendment. Okay.
But isn't that the sort of thing that you guys, I mean, wouldn't this be relatively easy for you to make a recommendation on?
The one thing I was gonna say is I feel like there's also like there's terminology stuff in here too. That's probably where it gets like, it seems like reserve might mean something to you all that maybe isn't quite what it means to
That's
me,
what
where I'm sort of
ready
thinking
to
like
say.
general rainy day fund. I also think like restricted because the state says we have to
Right.
versus restricted because this is a savings account that's important to us. Feels like we've got that with roads versus vehicle replacement. So I also think it would be helpful to everyone involved to get some clarity around what are we like legally not allowed to touch? And what have we decided we really don't want to touch? That's different meaning of restricted.
You want more narrative?
I don't necessarily want more narrative. I just would like for especially the folks who are here month in and month out to have some agreements about what do these words mean and how are we bucketing stuff? And especially if there's a lack of clarity around, for instance, the timber deposit interest fund. If this commission has the ability to clean that up and say, we don't really know what the LS people thought, but if what we want it to be is this, seems like that could really help.
That would be.
We requested that last budget cycle and it just didn't happen.
I was just getting ready to say for the submission of that number one question on reserves on the Q&A. I must have rewrote that 3 or 4 times. We get audited on these minutes and they check our language. And so with Clayton's help, we went through and let's just define what this is. Let's just define what that is. And And that's what we tried to get to on the answer to number one. It's not that there's not money hidden here, there, and the other, and I was trying to say, there is money here, this is funded 315 by the general fund. And if the world half ended tomorrow and we needed to put our hands on some cash, we would have access to that. But a reserve fund, we do not have as part of the spring off of the general fund.
Mhm.
We all come from different backgrounds, so I'm sure we're all analogizing to something that we're really comfortable with, which wouldn't help anyone else here. I'm sure you've got a medical analogy to this, and I have a systems engineering view of how I'm looking at this, but some way that we're all talking, that we know that we all have the same intent,
Mhm.
so that we can actually make decisions about it.
Were there other questions related to Q&A?
Yeah, thanks. So that was mostly trying to tackle reserve funds, contingencies, unappropriate, and I have a better sense of those different things and why the terms used. Anyone have any other questions on that general topic of money that carries over from year to year? No, great. Okay. So you sure you were asking about other Q&A stuff? Yeah, I
Yes.
think that seems great. Chris, do you have additional stuff on the Q&A?
Let's pick out three of them. Sherry on number 2. Asking about indirect reimbursements.
Yeah.
Gosh, your answer said, these charges are allowable for several, Hood River County revenue streams that are still not being requested, including grants. Do you
That
have-
is true.
Do you have, okay, so I'd
So-
like to go on record as saying we ought to ask for absolutely maximum indirect rates on
Can
every
you
single
speak
grant
directly
contract we
into
can get.
the microphone? When you said that.
I think
That's
this has
all.
been a work in progress in terms of bringing the grants manager on and putting the policies around how we're managing that program. And you know, the ability to request indirect does vary by grant source, but we just need to make sure that we're always asking for it. I think sometimes it does make staff feel like we might be less competitive asking for that overhead, but if we're able to, we absolutely should.
So I know on the forestry, and it's perfect timing because Doug just walked in. I know that every time that forestry does a grant, there's always overhead in that. Am I right, Doug?
Not
No.
always,
Not always, almost always?
only if allowed, so.
Only-
PRD
well, yeah.
currently doesn't allow for overhead.
No, but when it's allowed.
Exterior for like, only for direct things like, certain staff can be covered. So PRD grants, the APD grant, for example, covers, 40% for one of our permanent staff. As well, recreation trail manager, as well as, procedural staff.
But seems,
So, for work that's done on.
Chris is asking about indirect, and I'm sure you're saying we're not doing indirect in any of the
But
forestry
for
grants.
administration, budget and finance, currently that's not allowed by PRD.
Okay.
We did, here recently, through one of our staff, connected them to look that idea, to OPRD, see if they would consider adjusting their, conditions there. It might take a few years on that, but at least we started the conversation.
And I think that's the whole premise of, you know, the departments work so hard to get grant funds to operate their program. It's thinking about the, again, the cost of our backbone services. So, yeah, budget and finance, IT, HR, all of those other things that make the county fit. And we had a discussion today about really needing to do everything we can to shore up the general fund, which supports all of these questions.
And it goes beyond grants. I mean, again, to the extent that a grant allows it, I'd say ask for the maximum. I don't think it makes you less competitive. In my experience, if the grant allows for an indirect cost reimbursement, they expect all applicants to ask for the max. But I've extended to contracts too. If you're talking about creating a contract with another entity, ask them for another 20%. So thank you for saying that, yes, there's some opportunities there, and I hope that'll all get followed up on.
Thank you.
Is that, do you guys know if that's a meaningful chunk of money? Obviously, every dollar's helpful, but are we talking big dollars, or we're talking, is this a relatively thin amount of money?
My approach is that there's probably no $3 million solutions out there.
Lots of,
There's probably
Thousand.
$2,000 solutions. So we should ask for it.
great. Thank you.
Yeah.
And when you see the number of grants across our organization, smaller per grant, but cumulatively impactful.
In recreation, it could have made an $89,000 difference this year to the general.
Wait, how do you get a number like that?
We took 10% of how much of the
Oh, okay.
budget they're spending.
Okay, so, but you're saying if it were allowed, that would, you're not saying that we're passing up on $89,000 worth of allowable indirect, you're saying if it were allowed for all of our grants, there would be $89,000
That would be.
Or more.
Yeah.
or more.
Let's keep working through the Q&A.
Just one more, and this is the nitty gritty ones, 5B. On surveying, I'm still struggling to understand the answer about where the revenue is coming in. So my understanding is a survey function will be shared with Wasco County, and Wasco's on the hook for half of it. The funds that were mentioned only receive revenue by transfer from general. So where does the money from Wasco County come in?
This is managed by Corey. She's our public works director. And this is changing a little bit this year. We got permission to hire a surveyor more than a year ago, I think, but we never have hired. We're still contracting with Wasco. Corey, take it from there.
So we have an IGA with Wasco County. We are paying Wasco County for our surveyor. The intent is that we would hire a surveyor and Wasco County would also have a surveyor.
Oh, okay.
If
So it's
there
not-
isn't,
okay.
we would need to adjust the IGA if we are successful in obtaining that, getting a surveyor on board. But if at that point, it will likely be a no cost exchange where they would deputize our surveyor and we would deputize theirs for backup.
Okay, so basically, instead of paying Wasco for a county surveyor, we'll hire our own.
Yes.
Okay, got it, thank you.
And in terms of currently, there is not a general fund impact to the surveyor position.
That is correct.
But that doesn't mean it shouldn't have, for some of the services that they provide for the general fund, but currently it is provided out of the road fund.
I didn't understand that last part of your answer. You said it doesn't mean that there shouldn't be.
If there are services that the surveyor is doing that are not having a direct impact to the road fund, it should be paid for by those other funds. Currently, the surveyor is paid for out of the road fund.
It also is, just to note, in addition, it's also paid for by a public lane corner fund.
Yes.
And then some through the forestry department. So those are current costs that are being realized, but there is work that they are doing for the general fund purposes that we're not getting general fund reimbursement for that.
Do you have any example of that? It's like, sorry, just waiting until you walk far enough away.
Property divisions,
So stuff that comes through community
Survey.
development.
yeah. Community development, the ORMAP grant that we did for property line adjustments, things like that. Most of the work that the surveyor does is actually benefiting, general fund purposes.
And so the stuff that's done, like boundary line adjustment on someone's developing a parcel and does a boundary line adjustment, aren't they paying for the cost of that in the fees that they're providing to the general fund?
It's not fully realized, but yes.
And it is an area that we've identified that we, as a county, need to do a wholesale fee study. to look at how our fees are comparable and what the percentage of cost recovery is that we're getting and need to be getting.
I guess the reason I'm asking questions is because you made me nervous because it sounds like something that could further hurt the balance in the general fund. But what I'm hearing is that when you put in place the ability to transfer that cost, you would also have fully realized that you would adjusted rates so that that cost was fully received from the private entity that's requested that land use action. Okay, so I shouldn't worry.
Ideally, yes.
Ideally, I shouldn't worry. Okay.
I have a question on that, Allison. So one of the last things you mentioned is we need a full study on the county's fees. Could you explain that a little bit more, like what your thoughts are with that?
Well, in coming through the Baker Tilly work and that they're looking at our fees against our comparable counties, we are low in a number of areas. And again, that's a policy decision. And so doing the analysis so that the Board and Budget Committee has an objective look at where our fees are compared to others would allow you to weigh in on where we should be. So the departments have been doing a really good job with their annual fee adjustments. It's just taking a fresh look. And I think one of the ones, when I first came on board, I know in community development, we hadn't looked at our fees in a number of years and have just started in on that process for those increases.
So are these fees things that staff can adjust throughout the year on their own, or do these adjustments take BOC approval? Like, what's the process for that?
They do take Board of Commissioner action, and currently it's done twice a year,
Okay.
June and December.
Once the Baker Tilly study does come out,
Mhm.
I'm assuming hopefully by June, but at least by December.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that'll be taken into consideration.
And it is a regular course of action of all of our departments. I think it's just, again, benchmarking it, and we've tended to be fairly conservative, but I think we're at a point where we really need to look at cost recovery as we can. Full cost recovery.
You said that it's a policy decision, but you don't have policy. There's not a current policy from the Board of Commissioners that we want to be on the low side on these reimbursements, is there? Okay, so it's just you're saying that when it's reviewed, you will present how we compare to the rest of the world, and it will be a policy decision as to do we go low, medium, high?
Right.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the Q&A document?
Does that include the birds, or we're gonna talk about birds next?
Let's talk about PERS next. Let's talk about PERS.
Yeah, it's just a really broad question.
Yeah.
So we have this document you just gave us, which I've already somehow lost. But I'll just look at it. I'll look right over here. Oh, here, I found it. I think I found it. What is it, are there things that lead to what our number is? Or is it is it based on the actuarial, the ages and other things that we have no effect on, or what is it that causes us to be at the high or low end of these ranges?
Our actuarials do count. I cannot define to what extent, sorry. But of course, the discount, we did buy into a discount in 2004. We'll be paying for that for another 2 years, as I had said before, but it's no longer in effect. So what you're seeing here in these 2 years is the full effect of what PERS will cost as we move forward. And we should have updated rates for the following budget year in October of this year. So every 2 years, the state does their actuarial analysis, and it's based on our covered payroll and continued covered retirees. And then that actuarial study is gives you your rates for the coming years.
But so just I think it would be helpful for all of us to understand kind of what makes the rates go up and what makes the rate goes down. And so first of all, these rates, they are percentages of the base salary.
Yes,
Okay, so when someone gets a raise, does this percent change?
the percentage doesn't change. The
Yeah.
amount we pay in increases only because we gave them a raise.
Okay, but it doesn't go down because it's a fixed amount. It's not, it's a percentage of their.
I've only seen it go up over the years.
Yeah, so that's my next question. Does it, this number that we have here, these numbers that we have here, when it's, did you say, I'm sorry, it's by 2 or 3 years? Is it a 2 years? So it's a biennial process. When we get into the next biennium, you would start with these numbers and expect it to be these numbers or higher, right? No.
Oh, yes, next biennium will be these numbers or higher, and
Okay.
it will depend on whether we choose to go. We won't be able to go out for bonds. At that time, we'll have to wait a year. You can only have one out at the same time. Since we haven't paid for the 2004 series, we won't be able to renew a discount. It's not looking good anyway, the numbers, but we won't
Right.
be able to renew a discount bond relationship until 2009, 29,
Okay.
2030.
So one of the arguments for using some of our reserves, for spending down our reserves in this budget is because of the unusually high, because of the big jump in PERS. And it sounds like it's not something which is a one-time hit. It's from now on into the future thing, right? So how would we justify using reserves when we know that it's only going to be this or worse next year?
We can't.
Okay.
We have to adjust services probably to meet the level of service we'd like to offer the county and make choices there.
And the, you know, that 2-year actuarial analysis looks at the cost of your covered payroll, which, in the history that was provided in your packet, you saw that that has been increasing things. So based on our business practices moving forward, it is an understanding that we are on that trajectory. One thing that our county does is we also cover the employee share of the 6% match for PERS. Not every jurisdiction does that, but in order to be competitive with our employees, it's been a policy decision of our county to.
We have this in collective bargaining agreements, right? This isn't something that we could change.
It would take time to negotiate it out, yes.
And we do know now that we've seen the 2024 actuarial that our discount is gone. And that explains PERS in the state. They don't talk to us a lot about these things, but that explains the big jump that we saw last year. It was explained in December of 2025.
And that's because of the end of the side account effect.
Yes.
They don't give you the math to double check.
No,
The actuarial analysis, but the frustrating part of the actuarial analysis is it's a year in arrears, and then they're projecting the rates prospective. Right.
so that was as high as 5% sometimes. So you can see that how that made such a big difference this past year. It was really a relief in December to see, oh, good, maybe it won't go up so much next time.
It's just somewhat disturbing that we're getting such a huge number and we don't have a way to double check their math.
We can absolutely provide their actuarial analysis, and they have policies in regards to the percentage of covered costs that is required for the quote.
Okay,
Yes,
so it is derivable. It's just
yes,
not gonna be easy.
it's direct.
We're working with Piper Sandler on this too, to make sure that our decisions are correct, whether we do want to go out for bonds, whether we don't. It didn't end well this time.
Doesn't look like it ended well for anyone on this list.
I think it was a challenging year last year.
Yeah, and so just to be clear, this is like, we took out a bond, we got a chunk of cash, we tried to outstrip our PERS liabilities increasing with a return on that cash, that lump sum. And it did not strip that, that's why it aged out. And what we have is 2 years of just paying down the bond.
Right.
But
And what is the character of the market that is why it didn't pay out? Is it dry or?
The increases in the covered, so our increases in covered rates increased faster than the bonds were able to pay. So
Is that
essentially,
because of comp and class or?
we aged
Not
out.
just comp and class. I think every time we add a new position in the county, we should consider what we have over here that we might need to change up. Maybe it's training someone for this position. Maybe it's letting go or offering an early retirement. Because the math is done so far in advance, over 20 years in advance, they're projecting out salaries.
Right.
They're projecting that with what they know that day in 2004. It just wasn't enough to make it past our growth.
Yeah, in 2004, they did not anticipate what happened wholesalely with COVID and then the associated inflation that occurred after COVID. And that really was a tool that dismantled PERS more so than it was in 2004 when there was an attempt at a fix.
well, I mean, the flip side of that is we had a decade of no inflation before that, right? So I don't understand exactly.
So the side account is that, we didn't start that in 2004, did we?
Yes.
Oh, so that's all the way back then. Okay, that.
Yeah.
I'm a little less critical knowing how far back it is, but you're the finance guy.
And
I don't
at
get
one
it.
point,
Yeah.
we could bring Piper Sandler in for a presentation. It is a fascinating presentation.
I'm just trying to understand, we make decisions and we have to understand what effect the decisions have. And I'm grappling here to find something, I can't find a thread to grab onto. I'm used to understanding things, and I don't understand this.
Yeah.
So,
One thing you will know that when the county put the PERS bonds into place, every fund has a PERS in lieu line. So that is a recovery of a portion of that bond payment from that department. Our current bonds are due to be paid off in 2028. And so that PERS in lieu will still exist. And so in essence, there is a cushion built in for when that bond payment ceases. That reserve amount is the last page in your book, page 273.
That's a debt service fund.
It's a debt service payment currently, but with the
Fund
bond.
number 490.
Yeah,
It has a
Yes.
balance, so
Right.
If I may go, Arthur, I think we all have to recognize that there's a huge limitation around PERS. There's actually very little that any county can do to affect their PERS rate. A year ago, I was shocked at this increase, looked on their website. It turns out that they reduced their presumed rate of return. If PERS bases all of their projections for these billions of dollars of contributions on an 8% rate of return, and then assumes suddenly that it's only going to be 7%, we know what that's gonna do to everybody's rates. So
Yeah.
it has to be made up in rates.
That's the
remember in
expected
2000
return, 7 or 8%.
I think they reduced it to 7%, which is why we saw this huge jump in rates about 2
Okay.
years ago.
Wish we could all put our money in accounts for 7 or 8%.
I remember in 2001, when I first was working at a public entity, they said, and that was when PERS was in crisis. They threw off all the PERS board members who were on the PERS system, invented OPSERV, and said, okay, now we have to wait for 30 years for all the tier 1 and tier 2 people to essentially come off the system, and OPSERV will fix it. And that hasn't happened. So what we need, Arthur, is for maybe you to devote your life to going down to the legislature and fixing PERS. It seems to me that we need a system still less beneficial than OPSERV.
Sounds like
Or
you're
this is
far more
just gonna
qualified
keep
than me.
happening.
Well, and the other piece of it is, you know, your public safety are the higher rate, for PERS. And during the last legislative session, did they put deputy DAs in the last legislative session? So the legislature is putting more people into this PERS rate that is 5% higher than our general rate. So that, you know, that's an impact that's outside of our.
Oh. You can't just go on and say,
No, that's really helpful.
Sorry, you were.
But I think that, I mean, I think what I'm getting is sort of, I think, Arthur, probably the point you were trying to make is this PERS impact on the budget is more new normal than a one-time surprise.
So, given that, Sherry, I think one of the things you mentioned was that this PERS in lieu fund is just gonna continue growing even after 2028 when this bond payment finishes. Is that right?
I've
Is that
heard
how I'm
talk.
understanding it?
This is something we put on ourselves. We put this in place, the general fund, every division, every department where there's an employee. There is a person there. It is different. We can't charge grants for person live. So, but it's meant to go into this debt service account to pay debt. I have recently heard some whispering that we might consider leaving that in place for future reserve. But letting this, what's been debt service over the years, we're so used to it, turn into a reserve account.
It's
The
like
bond-
self-insurance.
The bond would be paid off, and so if you continued that collection, then you would essentially be pretty much concerned.
So we have a rate, the 25-27 rates are between 17.8 and 23.1%. Is there a blended rate which you have in your head as to what our actual rate is when you look at our mix of payroll?
I know that I approved cash out of payroll for, on average, about $345,000 twice a month. And that we pay PERS $100,000 or more. To that. That's a large chunk.
But that's more than these percentages.
So
you know.
in your question in regards to a blended rate, could you?
Well, actually, no, she's getting right at that. I just, you know, for every $100,000 of payroll, how much should we be expecting to be paying to PERS? And is that something that's going to change over time? Is the blend going to change in any appreciable way? And it sounds like you just gave a number that sounds like it might be higher than this, which.
Well, the PERS only comes out once a month. So if you put that at $700,000 payroll to. Wish I could think of the exact, it's over 100,000, but let's
Okay,
just
well,
say,
it's a question for later. Let's just put it aside. Don't need it today.
yeah,
No,
I know, I just don't have it.
I'm sure you have it. Really, the more interesting question for me is, should I expect that blend to be going towards the lower end or the higher end over time, or it's gonna stay kind of right where it is today? So that's in terms of the budgeting, that's the question I'm trying to get to for budgetary purposes.
It grows, our payroll has grown
No, I know that,
14%, PERS has grown.
but I don't know what it's going from. So I don't know if we're going from 17.8% or from 23.1%.
It plus the 6% that the county provides on top of those 23%.
Those
Okay,
rates
yeah, about
you
that.
see across there, you have to add 6% to all those rates.
I think that explains your mathematics.
When do we get the chance to renegotiate the pickup?
Yes.
I think those contracts.
A way in the
In regards to
future.
the
percent.
Yeah, it's called the first pickup, right? I think is what they, how they're considering.
Contract coming into negotiation, next year.
But it's not reasonable to expect that you magically, that you just come and say, yeah, we don't need this anymore. That's not gonna happen.
It's the 6%. The employee has to pay.
Yeah.
So if you change our policy now, half the municipalities in the state, the employee pays, half the employer pays. If you change that, you're basically cutting everyone's salary 6%. Of course, they get a 7% raise for the most part, so they get a 1%.
Yeah, I would not be counting on this as a budgetary action.
It's just interesting against the backdrop of having to cut services as well, you know, I mean, but I appreciate what you're saying. Or,
I think, in this budget, we are contemplating an update to common class, which we look at, again, take a fresh look at where we're sitting against our comparables in terms of pay, and then you would have an objective metrics against which to think about that additional.
But the policy that we've set previously, that this board of commissioners set, is that we pay a competitive salary, and if we can't afford the payroll, then we deliver fewer services.
Okay, we're at 3 o'clock. I'm gonna propose we go for another 20 minutes or so and then take a 10-minute break. Does that work for folks? Okay, that's the only session scheduled for today. I have sort of a bigger picture question. What are other areas of questions that folks have so we can think about kind of batching them as we go forward?
I had some questions about then what we can expect in terms of any information about Lake Utility before the budget is passed.
Okay. That makes
So
sense.
I asked the question last time, and I want to know if there's any answer on that.
Okay, great.
I have some questions probably for Director Beebe about assessments.
Okay.
County in general.
Okay.
On what you get to.
yeah, I was curious about the recurring contract and professional services kind of line items that seem to stack quite a bit, and just like how we track that, and if there's any way of synergizing some of those to
Okay,
cut costs out.
okay. I think, okay.
Questions around any potential partnerships and duplication of services with partners such as the cities, school district, Wasco County.
Okay. Okay. Commissioner Weathers? Not
Most
that,
of it
not
has
that
to-
everyone has to have questions. I just don't want to get.
No, I mean, I think, I think the utility
Okay,
is really important, really
okay,
understand.
My questions, I think.
okay. Okay, Chris, do you have any more?
No particular.
Other ones? Okay, okay. All right, I think mine was sort of, for me, it's kind of the big picture thing that like, I remember I was struck last time when you said like you tend to budget about 3. So I don't go for this, but you tend to budget about 3% increase revenues. That's if taxes go up by, maybe we add some things. Looking at the payroll trend, which has been quite substantial in the last few years. It looks like it's on the order of 7% a year over the last 10 years, 6 to 7% a year. I don't see how we create sustainability if that's the trend, that's the dominant trend in revenue is property tax, and the dominant trend in expense is personnel. And so I guess I just was interested in your thoughts about how you decided what to put forward in this year's budget.
So the pay structure is built in, per common class. It put a pay grade and a step range in place. The steps that are negotiated into many of our contracts are 4%. And then the COLA is in addition to that. And so that common class was put into place in 2022, I believe. And again, that was an effort to look at the pay structure of the county to ensure that we were paying competitively compared to our competition. So again, that is in place, we've been negotiating it to many of our contracts. The board set out a policy when the conference class was put into place to revisit it every 4 years. And so we had it scheduled for last year, but with Baker Tilly coming up and the potential change coming from that, it's scheduled during this fiscal year. And that will give us a fresh benchmark on where we are. Yeah, structurally, when you're looking at, the cost of pay, with the step increases and the COLA, versus property tax being our dominant funding source. And typically property tax, we budget at 3%. Last year was a great year, and we had 9%, and that was based on, a large user coming out of their, special assessment, as well as the good work of our assessment division looking at a number of properties that were aging out of their exemptions. So I think it is, the reason why we are doing the Make the Tilly work is because there's a structural issue. And their recommendations will look at the full gamut of potential revenue sources, potential restructuring. To answer the question about the timing of that, I've had discussions with them. We always love to put a bow on things, then we socialize them in that manner, but I have talked to them about doing a presentation next Thursday, and they may be able to do that. They're looking at getting their draft report together by May 12th, so that we've got 3 weeks to comment on it, so that a final recommendation can be provided to the board at the June 15th meeting. I think, preparing our department heads, we, as I have been mentioning, we've all been working on this together. Let them know that this kind of an analysis really looks at the full array of how we do things. And so it can get uncomfortable, but in a county our size, trying to provide the array of services that we are, most statutory, some discretionary. This will be a really good work for us. So I think your essential question was setting out the proposed budget for this year, the way that we did, is there are, number one, we are very lean. What we're hearing from our, their analysis with our comparable counties is that, we are very lean in the way that we operate.
You mean staffing levels?
I'm sorry.
Staffing levels are lean.
Staffing levels are lean. Change takes people in order to do it. And we are also facing a retirement rate within the next 3 to 5 years. We can have a turnover of 30 employees in an organization our size. That is substantial. It also comes with the payroll that is at the highest end of our pay range. So we have longevity. So we have the 7%, but then those at the highest end are also getting longevity, which is a factor of keeping and our employees here also. So I think the idea was a placeholder budget to allow us to get to Baker Tilly so that we can have a thoughtful discussion about what is the work plan headed forward. Are we going for revenues? If we are going for, if the budget committee and board say that you want to start with cuts, cuts require negotiations. We have 5 bargaining agreements that we would have to work through if there were major changes. And if there were suggestions about major structural changes, there are contractual relationships that you have to work through. And so the idea was that this would give us a placeholder with new direction for this fall to be a substantial work effort to get to what's next.
You made a comment, cuts require negotiations. Are you saying we have contracts that require a certain number of employees to be employed?
Well, for example, if there was a grant that we
being discontinued. Or if the budget committee were to say, we are not going to provide this service but contract it out. Many of our contracts require negotiation and contracting out of service.
In terms of general payroll, we're not required to have a certain number of employees by any of the union contracts, are we?
Thank you. Yeah.
Quick question on one of the things you mentioned. We have up to maybe 30 employees who are gonna be close retirement age in this next year,
3 to 5 years.
in 3 to 5. Gotcha. Have you or HR director considered any ways to help kind of keep better track of that? Like who is gonna decide to go when? How do we see that as a rate?
Well, so there in HR, there are certain privacy around folks in their tenure with their employment, so you have to be very delicate about that. But in terms of having an understanding of creating a succession plan, that is our work with each of the department heads to make sure that they have an understanding who in their organization might be headed that way. Because we have a number of places within the county where we have single points of failure and we don't have people coming up behind them. And so if there is an essential service that we're providing, that is part of the concern about moving too quickly with some of the cuts, knowing that just to use round numbers, if you have 20 people and it's $150,000 per employee, that's a $3.5 million nexus in your budget. Every retirement offers you an opportunity to relook at that position and how we do the work. And it would be informed by the work that we do in the state facility in terms of what are the services that we want to provide and how are we operating.
And don't the replacements generally are coming in earlier in their career, so they're generally cheaper, aren't they? Or is that not the case anymore?
Sometimes not. I mean, there's competitiveness. Some of these positions are very technical and we're getting people looking at our area from the outside of their area in order to get the best. We have really great people, and in order to get the best, the pay might be equitable to what you work in.
Is there any way to just estimate what that might look like? I know it's hard. I mean, it depends on the position, surely, but I guess what I'm kind of hearing is that it doesn't solve it. It would have likely have, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, likely have a very small impact on overall payroll.
I think
If you
that's
fill all those
reasonable.
positions.
Yeah, if we refilled all of them, I think that's reasonable.
Except for the longevity.
Except for longevity.
But not all us old crippled geezers will be leaving with longevity. Some of us just got here with our abundance of experience.
To retire.
One of the things that does change though is one of the employees retiring out of tier 1 or 2, and the next and the replacement coming in as officer, right? What is just in general, like what is the difference in how much the county pays for an officer employee versus a tier 2 employee?
We can get that.
I'm just curious, is like just in general, is it like 10% less that we pay in?
It's right here.
You have it? Sherry's got it somewhere.
17
everything somewhere.
1.2, right?
I think it's this thing here.
It looks like tier 1, tier 2 is at 21.22. And like I'm under a general. So we just had one person retire that I know of, had abundance of longevity. She was at 30 years. And she was receiving FERS of this 21.22 plus 6%, so 27.22%. Where I received 17.81 as a newer employee. I've been here 3 years. 17.81% plus 6.
That's only because you were not on PERS. We could be hiring a replacement who was on PERS, tier one already.
That is true.
Yeah. So we can't know that.
Oh. So just to clarify, if we fill a position with a person who was already in the PERS system, then they stay at their current, whatever that level was. Okay.
And we can't consider that in hiring, can we?
I wouldn't think so.
I wouldn't think so either. I'm assuming you can't, but Karen back, because the housing, no, right? Okay. I'm just.
Question one in the interview.
Yeah.
I think that smile and laughs is all.
I think it's important to say those things in public.
So apprenticeship program.
Thank you.
A few more minutes. Matt, Althoff, did you want to go with your question that you have?
Oh, sure, yeah, I mean, it's pretty vague, really, but just kind of going through fund by fund, right? And we're looking at all these lines that say, sorry, we'll get to contract services professional. And I mean, I was struck that they're just kind of recurring 6-figure numbers, and I'm just wondering, countywide, do we have a way of tracking all the contracts that each department are taking out for outside services and how some of those could be jigsaw pieces that fit together a little more smoothly? Sorry, it's a pretty tough one to answer.
And there are contracts for services that are really specific depending on the work of the department. So you think about the range from like a contract for security services at the courthouse to a contract for Medicaid reimbursement collections for the health department to some other like contract services for building a project. So it really does vary across the county. And I think one of the things that I have worked on really hard since being here is getting our departments together to have these discussions by having a cohesive technology services department, for example, that's looking at the different software contracts and hardware that all the departments are doing, looking for alignment there, as well as our professional services contract. So long answer, which I provide long answers. To say recognize and when we can do it, making sure that we're asking questions. And certainly those contracts that are above my authority come to the board for station. We're not tracking them.
Okay, so we don't have just like a rough. I mean, you could go through line by line and figure it out and then try to.
Directors are managing them. We try and keep, Sophie does a congregation of, it's supposed to be signed by Allison as the only legal authority to sign contracts under $150,000. Supposed to be signed by Allison, then it goes back to the vendor to be signed. When it comes back to us fully executed, they're supposed to copy us and we try to congregate them in one place because we need them for audit purposes.
But you,
And there is some delegated authority below.
Yeah, I appreciate that. You don't have to come ask for permission every time you want to engage in service.
but is behind that, you're wondering if we'd be better off with regular staff that were doing that, like our GIS, law enforcement, planning.
So, yeah, I mean, some means of efficiencying as the big utility was saying. I mean, it's just such it seemingly is a huge expense and it's very vague and it's hard to kind of like see that recur and not have really any idea what it's about.
So you're asking if we're depending too much on contracted services?
That would be one part of the question, yeah. And secondly, just if we could track it more granularly so that we could potentially find some savings.
Are you asking for the data?
I like data, send it over, sure.
We don't track it, but I can ask the directors to provide a list of what's included in their budget.
Yeah, sounds like a big spreadsheet, but, if it's not too much trouble, does anyone else want to have a look at that?
I think you're asking a basic policy question. I think we should know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the way I.
And it is, interesting, there was, a push, I think, in this county, to do, a lot of even, employee work to contracts, so, that's something that we're continuing to evaluate, if there's the legalities around that, so instead of having staff having a contracted worker, and that's something that we're working through as it comes out, and a great example is we, in our health department, the public information person is a contractor. We would like to transition that to a position, and talking through the nuances of how much more efficient it is to be an employee versus a contractor, it makes perfect sense, and so that's something that we would like to do.
Might also be worth noting that some of those things you're talking about, the recurring nature of some of it, and part of that question, and some of them are things that the departments are getting grant revenues for, and they're executing their grant requirements through contract services in a lot of these cases too, so that might be why it's referring, can there be efficiencies? I'm not answering that part, but.
No, I appreciate it. It's a muddy picture. I get it. Thank you.
So I know, Commissioner Moretti, you had questions, kind of, I think, kind of big scale around services consolidation. I'm thinking maybe you could do that after the break. And what other items do we have that we'd like to discuss after the break?
Tax assessments in general.
Tax assessments, that's good. Okay, we can take them up next. Are you doing any
I
other?
have a big question, and maybe that may be the very tail end.
Okay. Okay. So services, tax assessments, unknown big question.
Oh,
Excellent.
yeah.
Let's jump into that order. Good. Okay, so I declare this committee in recess for 10 minutes to take a break, and then we'll return. All right, I call to order the second chapter of today's meeting. Commissioner Moretti, what are we going to do your stuff next?
Thanks, Chair. My question around policy was if there's anything in place that would support whenever we're looking, especially when we're in a tough budget year, how we're partnering with other organizations because we are such a small and mighty community. Duplication of services where we could consolidate and or partner with the city, with other counties, or contract out with potentially folks who have more experience, or as something that we looked into before we start something new. And in an effort to save money and build partnerships. I don't know if there's a policy out there.
Well, we certainly had, off the first organizational assessment that was done when I was, before I got here, there was the recommendation in there in regards to the changes that we implemented with the health department. Rolling prevention and veteran services into the health department. That has been really beneficial and has allowed for, administrative staff to serve grant programs and other, services. There's more work there that can be done. Certainly, there's a whole array of services that are provided, and I think, again, you'll see that in the basic report. When staff had a discussion about, the ways that we do business, that really becomes more of a legislative discussion. There have certainly, since my time here, been opportunities. Our county is really proud of the robust services that we provide to GIS and through technology services. So there have been opportunities from other jurisdictions where we even could have taken on contract services. we need to have an open, ongoing dialogue about that. I know we're open, to having those discussions. I think, the elected leadership helping us with those discussions would be great. I realize there are more of those things that can happen. And I think that's where we get into more of the policy discussions about how we do business. But we are a small place, and, you know, a county our size, there are, in my long experience, I have found that when the grants are plentiful, programs get started. And so now we're heading into this phase where we're aging out of COVID, the landscape is changing on the federal and state level. So it's going to force some of these discussions. I think it would be really great to have county-wide discussion and put people in their places of strength, like who is most aligned with this. Because from a county's perspective, where it might appear that we have duplication, a service may have been started by a nonprofit, but we have a statutory authority to provide it. So again, that's a larger discussion, but it will be a part of our discussion moving forward.
Allison, is it possible to generalize from that last statement that you made? You said the county has a statutory obligation in certain areas to provide a service. Does the statute generally require that we provide it directly, or would it allow for us to contract for it?
Depends. Yeah.
Pass it on.
Right. So, for example, our county over the years has regionalized services. So if you look at Mid-Columbia Center for Living, so our Board of Commissioners are the local mental health authority. But we have come together with the other counties to form an ORS 190 organization to run that runs Mid-Columbia Center for Living. And then we are a member on the board. I think PAC is another example of that. Norfolk is another example of that because of the statutory responsibility to provide jail. So yes, in these places, what services? And I think we have long history of some of those services being provided. And then some are provided through contract services when we don't have staff as well. So that's part of that review.
When we contract services, can we estimate a savings there when we're not paying for PERS or insurance, or is that we're usually paying at a higher rate with a contractor because
they have a robust
yeah.
rate, yeah, where they're paying all of their own expenses. I think we could. I'm very essentially. Does that answer that?
Yeah, and this Baker Tilly, you said might have some of those suggestions with potential partnerships in them. Okay, great.
You had said, could we estimate our savings through contracted services? And we have a data request in that I'm providing. So I'm listening to you, and you said that about estimates. I don't think that's something we could get done in a week.
Oh, I wasn't putting those two things together.
I was wondering, like, oh, no, in general, would you expect to save money long term?
In some respects, I mean, the sheriff just came over and was bragging, here's my contracted services spreadsheet, and he's paging down. And we talked about his contractors, security contractors by the front door as you enter the courthouse. And in that case, we're saving money, and it would be easy to quantify, but that's the only thing I could think of that would be easy right off the top to quantify.
Thank you.
But in terms of if we're making structural changes to, contract out something that we had employees doing, or we're merging organizations with another organization, those are things which we talked about last week, how most of those structural changes cost money. So you have to upfront funds, upfront reserves available for those expenses, and that feeds into the discussion we need to have if we're anticipating making changes of an unknown sort. In the near future, we better have some cash available to allow us to do it, or we may be stuck.
Matt, do you wanna ask you questions about assessment?
Yeah, so some of my questions about the assessments,
You wanna have Brian?
oh, that would be great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Watch for him.
Thank you for being here. When we talked last budget cycle, we talked about hiring a new assessor, onboarding them. Amount of time it took to get them up to speed and have them start, working. Could you fill us in on how that process went and kind of what that looks like now this next year?
Yeah. So we were only until just recently able to recruit for that position. And we've since filled that position. Unfortunately, we filled it with an internal candidate. So we have another vacancy to fill because of that. So that's the current status of that position.
Okay. So when I look at the breakdown of the county revenues that you gave, that Allison built for us, page 17, how your tax dollars are spent in River County. So the way I read this, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that for every dollar that comes into the county in tax revenue, page 17, tax revenue, only about 16 cents of that is available for use by the county in the general fund. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for every amount of work that the new assessors do to bring in revenue, only 16% of that actually is able to be spent in this budget process. Over half of it goes to the school district.
Correct.
Which is great. I have kids in the school district. Love that.
But it
Love that
doesn't
for
really
them.
go there.
What's that?
It doesn't really go there because of the
Doesn't really go.
spending formula.
It's the state school fund, and then it comes back.
What?
It comes back based on the number of students. So whatever he collects, the school fund sends us based on the number of students we have, not based on how much he's collected.
I'm not really following. It's really fun. It sounds very complex. But either way, only about 16 cents of that comes to the county, right? That's fine. So what are some ways that we can, well, I guess, what are the benefits to the budget of having another assessor brought on board?
I mean, besides the additional potential revenue.
Right,
for the county.
where does that revenue come from though? Is it just reassessing properties that hadn't been assessed in years?
That's correct, yes. So we've been unable to do reappraisals for several years now. And so when we don't do reappraisals, what happens in the community is people they do things that either don't require permits or they don't get the required permits. And so things get built that we're not aware of that would add value to the tax roll. People also subsequently remove things without telling us, and so there's an equitable piece there for us to then also remove things from the tax roll.
From a property owner's perspective, does this reappraisal process happen automatically every year? If nothing actually changes with the property, or do property tax rates continue to go up by that, what, the 3% cap every year? Does that just happen automatically, or does the property have to be reappraised every year for the rate to increase?
Now you're getting into the mechanics of the property tax system, which can get fairly complex fairly quickly. But in general, assessed values generally go up 3% for each property automatically every year. I use the term general because it's not in every case. It's dependent. It's a property by property situation.
Okay.
So, but on average, most properties are doing that.
Okay. Is that a process that is run by your department though?
That's correct.
Okay. Yeah. So that's something you kind of have to manage, keep track of, and make sure that it's happening on an appropriate basis. Good, okay. Are we behind in that, in your opinion, for the county?
That component of us calculating the tax every year, I mean, that's something that we have to do in order to turn the tax roll. So no, that's something that happens
That
automatically.
just happens and you
Yeah.
guys are used to that and that's working okay.
Yeah.
It sounds like it's the reappraisal process that has a lot of friction there.
Yeah, reappraisals and then the lack of auditing, going back and looking at things that we've approved previously. For changes is the other avenue where I see potential for additional revenue.
Okay,
Making things up for new construction. For
Mhm.
example, like your people aren't getting permits.
okay. In your assessment, adding this new assessor position, what kind of revenue would that bring into the county, just through reappraisals?
Yeah. Based off of our last reappraisal effort and some other calculations that we've done, using, sampling. We currently estimate that there's about $500,000 worth of taxes that are currently out there that we aren't picking up. So 16% of that would belong to the county and the remainder to the other districts.
Okay.
500,000.
Excuse me, 5 million, that's correct. So
Oh,
it's
that
a little
is-
different.
Yeah.
So,
Another
yeah.
year out,
Little bit.
yeah.
Okay. So of those 5 million, do you consider these like new taxes, or are these just taxes that are owed, but just like we're not able to keep everybody current on what is due?
I think you can frame it either way.
Depends who you ask. Yeah, depends on if you actually own them or not. Okay,
It's taxes that should be on the roll.
But,
So, yeah.
but to put a sharper point on that, the estimate of an additional $5 million in taxes, that would be over time, that wouldn't be like tomorrow.
That's correct.
That would take-
There would be no way that we could pick up all of that additional tax revenue in 1 year. And in general, when we used to be able to complete reappraisals, we were on a 6-year cycle. So we would get through the entire county in 6 years
Mhm.
of going inspecting every property.
Are you saying that we don't, what cycle are we in now?
We are currently not in a cycle at all. We are not performing any reappraisals at all currently.
And how long has that been?
It's been going on for about 6 years.
So 16% of 5 million is about 800,000 divided by 6 is an additional 140,000 a year or something. That we're potentially.
So how much does it cost to hire a crazy with PERS and benefits? Probably about the same, maybe.
Yeah.
About a watch.
But then.
Except it's 140, then 280, then 420, then, I mean, in terms of the additional revenue,
Because you get the 140 every
you get the 140 every year.
year.
That's the
Ultimately,
point.
it's
Okay.
$800,000 a year that we're passing out by
Yeah,
not
Okay.
being caught up on assessments.
you're not adding an assessor every year, so.
That's sick. Thank you for correcting.
I was gonna ask a question, we have the waterfront urban renewal district who's aging out. And so that process of reassessing all those properties upon aging out of an urban renewal district is a whole other level of it as well, correct?
In general, we wouldn't do a reappraisal effort per se, just based off of an urban renewal. That's more of just a rate change of which properties are being where.
Just, they were continuing to pay taxes, they were just, it was going into the urban renewal bucket.
They're on our list like all the other.
So
So if we're not on a cycle now, do you foresee with the position bill, then that cycle will start?
I would hope that within the next year or two, we can begin reappraisal again. So, we recruited from within, then we're gonna have a train up process. It generally takes about 2 years for an appraiser to be trained and ready to go. They start to be productive before then, but it's a process.
So there was some place, I'm searching for the tax summary and stuff, and I can't figure out where I got that information from, but there's some place where the concept of new two roles is introduced, where the total, property base, the taxable assessed value is increasing roughly by 3%, but then we go beyond 3% because of stuff that's new to rolls. And new to rolls is made up of either properties that have been, recently developed, or when you go around and do your 6-year assessment, you find that someone's added a bedroom without telling you. Right? Does that data exist in a form that we could separate out how much of that historically has been new construction versus improvements?
Commissioner Bowers, is your question, are we able to differentiate between the exception value due to new construction versus other things?
Yes, the tax that we're collecting goes up by 3.0000% annually, basically. But the average has actually been closer to 4, a little bit over 4%. And that's because we have a lot of new construction, new businesses come in, personal property goes up, personal property tax goes up. But there's a chunk of that, which is people have done renovations, and that those are captured. They pull a building permit in the process of giving them the occupancy, whatever happens after that. There is an assessment that results in additional tax getting paid. So their bill the next year is more than 3% higher than it was the previous year. Do we have a data source where we can separate that stuff out?
Yeah, we're able to see how much exception value occurs year after year. That's the term for the any change in a property that's outside that statutory 3% limit is an exception change.
So even if it was an empty piece of property and someone builds a house on it, that's still an exception.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's the things that create an exception are, new construction. If you disqualify a property from an exemption or a special assessment, those create an exception event.
I'm just feeling like that might answer Matt's question, at least to see historically how much of the, well, I guess we really know what the answer has been, that the new construction and improvements have added another 30%. So, yeah, roughly 30% to the rate of increase in our property tax collections annually.
I mean, it varies year to year. Yeah, absolutely.
That's quite significant.
Yeah, one of the things that I pick up from this is that the property tax revenues are about a fifth of the overall revenues for the county. And it does seem that it's going to be important to get back onto a 6-year cycle somehow. What do you think it would take to get there?
I mean, I think we're already headed in that direction. The issues in my office have been turnover, inability to hire, and significant retirements, all happening kind of simultaneously.
Yeah.
And so retirements are done. My whole staff is retired, and we have a new team now. So that's all taken care of. We fixed some stability issues with the common class. We're not seeing the turnover that we used to see in our office. So now we're starting to see some stability, which is going to allow us. And then we added another staff member. So those 3 things are all. For example, this year we are a couple weeks ahead of where we were last year at this time, as an example. And I continue to see that trend improving as we go along. Assuming nothing changes, taking us back the other way.
You did a presentation, or you and other assessors did it. Other folks in your position did a presentation at AOC 2 years ago on how much tax was being left on the table. Basically, there were a bunch of estimates that were done in that, which I think might be directly what Matt's asking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and my estimate hasn't changed from that time. I've been holding on to that same number. I imagine it's probably gone up, but I've been holding on to the $5 million number.
Okay.
We have had a concerted effort at the legislative level to statewide get more funding for assessment and taxation. Just because of this whole issue of short-staffed offices and limited revenues and having state resources to assist with the effort.
One of the things I noticed is that, it's the school districts and the cities who also receive funds from this effort, right? Is there any cost sharing with them to make all these reassessments happen? Or is it just something that it's the work that we do, that we pay for, and it just cascades to them? And they're very thankful, but is there anything that they can do to help with the effort?
Is there anything they could do to help with the effort? They could be supportive of our efforts in the legislature to fix the funding formula for assessment and taxation funding. And in general, the districts that I've spoken to in our county have been very supportive and helpful. But we, unfortunately, they have counterparts throughout the state that aren't really so helpful.
And collection.
What do you mean? In collections, Sherry, go ahead.
Just that he's talking about funding from the state, it includes collection costs too.
Can I ask Director Beatty, what is your percentage uncollected?
So I am not the tax collector. I get to ask that question.
98% and the state average is 95, 96.
Yeah, great, thanks.
And we eventually get it because it becomes a lien on the property, right?
Yes,
So it's 100% eventually, and the interest that we get is quite healthy.
yes. And when they get them to buy themselves out, we haven't had a foreclosure in 2003 or something. Didn't we? Okay. For it to get to foreclosure, it takes a couple of years process, yeah. And by the time they buy themselves out, it covers all our fees. So he's right, 100% collection of the loan.
Allison, Brian, do you, or Allison, you and I talked a little bit, know of any other counties that work with nonprofits where potentially a homeowner could donate more property tax that would go directly to the county and not to distribute to the other places? Or have you heard of anything like that?
I haven't heard about the idea.
We can take donations as a county.
We can't, I thought that we had a line item or.
It was at
Donations,
zero, so
someplace.
no one's donated, but.
We have a line item, it is at zero for donations.
That's for auditing purposes only.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
So someone asked me this specific question a week ago and I said, yes, I saw it in the budget.
Jeff Hexel was our last donor. He gave $500 when he left.
What did you say? We may or we may not accept donations?
We may accept donations.
Okay.
Yeah.
Everything else.
Okay.
Can I ask what the projected impact will be for like larger builds like Rand Road kind of complex that's going up? And what sort of like pipeline projects we have, what the revenue projections would be for that in the 5 to 10 years? Yeah,
That's a special case.
that is a special case. It's an urban renewal thing. So there's.
Yeah, I wouldn't have that information up on my head. What I could tell you, like, for example, on Rand Road, a good portion of that property is likely going to be exempt from taxes.
Oh, okay.
So we contributing to the tax.
Because it's affordable housing, I guess.
It's only been operated by affordable housing agency.
I'm not sure which program they're gonna go.
Okay.
Okay, so for that sort of stuff.
The difference, another example would be, the industrial property in Odell that is currently Porto, and so exempt for statute. However, if it is privately purchased and then built on, then that comes on to the tax rolls, and then the value of the warehouse, is additional new construction.
Okay, thank you.
Tax value.
Where are we in our discussion? Any items?
I have one small question.
Question is on it.
I have a small question. We saw a decrease in the forestry revenue. And this was because of the decreasing timber prices over time and the 10-year averaging process coming out with a lower number. We have, is that the trend we should expect to continue with that for a while?
Brian, and we can bring Doug up.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Brian.
Thank
Wait,
you all.
actually, lastly, Brian, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
With measure 5 and 50, when you're saying advocating at the legislature level, how realistic is that? You think, and what timeline, or, I mean, maybe Allison, if you think about VOC and council getting behind that, because ultimately.
Who's talking about the ability to, this is the copper stuff, right? This is the ability to charge.
I was hearing the change of measure 5 and measure 50 with it, which I think is a whole other effort.
But Brian, the process that Brian was involved in is the process to allow greater fees to be collected for the purposes of doing assessment and
Yeah, just really quick, the property tax system had a disintegration in the 1980s that was recognized at a statewide level. And so they implemented a grant program for counties to fund assessment and taxation. It was called the CAPA grant, County Assessment Function Funding Assistance Grant. And that grant, they never indexed it, so it was put in place and it's pretty much stayed stagnant since that time. And so it went from funding about 30% of the work that we do in our office to, I think we're like at 10% now. And so we've been working hard for several years at the legislature trying to fix that. But as you can imagine, property taxes aren't a popular thing to help legislators get themselves reelected, and therefore it hasn't gotten a lot of traction. So.
And that's where you're referring that like school districts and other districts could help support.
Yeah, the current funding formula uses a three-pronged approach. It uses a portion of state revenues. It uses a portion of the delinquent property taxes that it collected. And then it uses county recording fees. There's a portion of the county recording fees that goes to the state. And that's what makes up the money used to fund that grant. And we've suggested some changes to those mechanisms. So.
In regards to the measure 5 and measure 50 discussion, the League of Oregon Cities has gotten an early start on that. And then I know with the Association of Oregon Counties, the current chair, Ernst Park, that's really her goal is to look at it.
We have $142,000 decrease in the budgeted
10-year average.
10-year average amount timber deposit to general fund forestry. Yeah. So should we expect that order of magnitude to continue for a couple of years, or what can you tell us?
Yeah, I think right now, just based on, for the previous 10 years, we know where we're at, each of those years.
Page 64, by the way.
And we had kind of looking back over those 10 years, we had a pretty good run of, increasing values over time, culminating in 2022 approximately, with actually record timber prices. So I'm going back a ways, but it's a 10-year average that contributes to, what that transfer actually is. And since then, they kind of dropped down, which pretty much knew, and they kind of spiked up in 2022 that they're going to come back down. That didn't really follow the trend line perfectly. And they did, but then they dropped a little bit lower than that, and they kind of hung around that. Right around that 3.3 million, give or take a little bit, is kind of where they've been the last couple of years, and that's where we're trending this year too. The price that we just sold the sale today, this morning, and we had good competition from it, and that's good. But it's kind of moderate. I'm happy to get it, but at the same time, we're not on the doors off either. But that's from the economic forecast I've seen for the region. From the Northwest, That's kind of what it is. Nobody's predicting a big increase. There's some things out there where people are pointing to, well, it should do this or go higher or go lower, but I think it's just kind of lukewarm right now. There's just too many macro things in play in the US overall that even sometimes nationally, it's not allowing it to kind of take off. A couple years ago, they were kind of predicting it to kind of trend upward after a year or two, and that's not seeing that. It's one of those things you can't see everything coming. 2022, the spike that we got that year after a long upward trend, nobody was predicting that either. So sometimes it's the positive, we get better than what they predict, and sometimes it's lower. But really the last, going on the third year now, it's actually been kind of just stuck where it is.
So you're not gonna give me a number, are you?
Like how much? It's probably gonna be wrong, you know.
Let's give it.
You know, yeah, it's probably gonna be a lot, but near term, we're having that 3 to 5 million range in terms of what we're netting, that gross number. So the average now is high and it's going to be coming down. That's, 100,000 a year or maybe a little bit more, 100,000 a year. So the really elements of change in the 10-year average, you want to look at it. It's the year falling off and the year coming off. Right? The delta between that is going to be like divided by 10. That should change. Everything in the middle is the same year to year. And so, yeah, I kind of looked at that, and we could get into it more if you want to talk about history and trends over the last 40 years. We have a lot of records to that regard. It's actually a pretty good record with our experience. Quite clear back to the mid 70s, but the dynamics today are different, especially for us locally. Mill ownership has changed for rapidly in the board. But today, a good factor, really encouraging, that we have 5 bids on the day. And actually was missing one that we thought we were going to have. So that's pretty strong. That'll vary during the year depending on each sale. There's different kinds of wood, but fortunately we're selling a little bit bigger wood, I think, on average than maybe a lot of other folks. And it's pretty high quality wood on average. And as long as we have that in the package, it seems to attract mills from further away, and that larger wood can travel. I think if all we were doing was small wood, we'd be hurting.
Any thoughts on whether we should be looking at the grade bin 10-year averaging?
I think it suits us pretty well. It still moves, and it should. It should be based on what you're actually making. The previous formula that we used was actually not entirely based on what actually came in.
Based on bids.
It was a projected kind of a model number, I would say. And that caused the county problems being this be passed. And so it was blind spot, so to speak. And we had the opportunity to correct that at a time when it wouldn't really hurt us fiscally to make the change and shift so that it was a smooth transition to one formula to the other. Both of them had a 10-year average in it. And so I think we're better off because of that. Now,
but we're seeing variability by a full position, a full payroll position in a year. Why do you think it's good that we see the price of timber in that as a board? I think I would prefer to have very little change year to year.
I just think the way that Hood County has done it with the 10-year average has been one of the better systems that I've seen. Now, that's not to say you can't come up with something better. And I think, that may end up getting considered someday, and I have thought as well that you could come up with a different way to budget.
I'm just wondering if you, are you aware of other entities that use 15, 20-year averages? And if so, could we get some information on on whether that adds more stability to the dollar dividend at the end?
What I am aware of, from what I've been told, a couple other Oregon counties One had a 5-year average and one was more year to year.
Right.
Now, in how they actually budget that,
Mm-hmm.
do they use it for capital? Like, it won't kill them if they don't get it on there. type of thing, you
Right.
know? So there's different ways that you actually budget it into your, whether it's general fund or capital or something else.
Right, but the way we budget, we need to see stability. Right, that's,
It's preferable to have stability, so the 10-year average, like I say, I haven't seen any entities that do more than 10-year average.
could you take a quick look?
We can check around, but you know,
You must have like some online group, yeah. You guys,
Some of that through Baker Tilly.
Yeah.
They are looking at that in terms of how other. As well.
there's not many counties in Oregon that have forest land.
it doesn't have to be organized, this is a financial question.
Yeah, there's 3 that have a significant amount, and we're one of them. Other ones have much smaller amounts that doesn't really fund that much.
This could be any enterprise fund, it doesn't even have to be a you know, publicly owned, just understanding what the fiscal result would be of a longer average.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
If you could come up with a way to increase the revenues that the county sees from our forest land over the next 10 years, what would you do?
Well, I can tell you, since I came on for the last 15 years, I think about that constantly.
Hmm.
We've made changes already. One of the biggest ones we did when I first started, was we went to a seal bid. And just today, our bid that we got today, our bid that we got for the timber was over $100,000 more than the next highest bid. That's money left on the table. Nobody knows what the next guy is doing. I got a lot of pressure when I made that change. I had people coming to my office, closed door, yelling at me. But I can tell you, the county made money. And we're still making money on this. So that was one of the things we did. We are still a little bit subject to. We got to offer a product that they'll want to come here and fool with us. There's a lot that goes into that. You're difficult to work with. You're over regulating everything. Nobody's gonna want to work with you. They're not gonna pay the same amount of money for it. We try to streamline all those processes. You guys don't normally see that, so what we have to do between us and the auditors, the purchasers, try to streamline that as much to make that go as smooth as possible. You know, it's sometimes it is about relationships. As simple as that. It's not necessarily numbers, but it changes the numbers. But what would we do? There's not a lot of major stuff right now left on the table. I mean, it really is. There's little bits. Like, for example, one outside of the box thing in the last 5 years, we worked with commissioners on, probably heard about the carbon project, actually. A little bit outside of the box. We had to construct that project carefully so we can still harvest the levels we are, and it doesn't diminish our ability to manage the timber and harvest consistently. I think we're able to do that, actually, and we're able to get revenue from that. Now, how we actually end up spending that, I think up to this point, commissioners have had pretty focused on how they're gonna do that, but there's still, there's some discretion in that, even though they are somewhat restricted by ORS 275 and how we can use it. And one of the goals was to do that for forest land acquisition, the long-term play, grow the county forest land base. Over time, you'll be able to increase your harvest rate. Correspondingly, your revenue should increase as well at that point. But it's a long-term bet.
Well, so to clarify, what would that look like? Like, so when are those carbon funds available for that as an option?
We're hoping, we don't have them yet, but we're hoping this calendar year we'll actually see the first of that. It should come in over about 10 years.
But just, it's important for you to understand, because it's effectively, it's a real estate transaction on forest land. So those funds have to be used for
Forest land is one of the allowable items. It's a narrow range.
You can't use that to pay payroll in community development, as an example.
Correct.
Okay, but by adding, we could acquire more forest land, which then increases the amount of timber that we have available to cut, which means that we have more numbers, more dollars going to that 10-year average. So that's how it helps us.
It's been a long time goal, both in the forest management plan and practice. Also, it's now in our strategic plan, the requirement of forest land. This is the first time, since I've been here, and I've been around since '93, that I can actually connect the dots and say, we have actually an opportunity here to acquire pretty sizable chunks of forest land. And if we're able to pull that off, you know, that could actually move the needle. It's not like 1%. You know, start talking about 10% more, 1% more, 30%. Well, where does that look like? You know, that's a dream that I actually can connect the dots on now. Secondly, to the carbon project, we are looking at other avenues. I think we've demonstrated recently through a grant, one of the local government grant program, that there's opportunities. There's different types of grants that can be paired with funds that you have to acquire forest land. If you pair those together, if you have common goals, that we can expand not just the money that we have from the carbon project, we can add to that as we make acquisitions, maybe go farther and actually acquire more acres. So, you know, what does that look like if you can double the number of things? We're working in that regard, and that takes some time, building some relationships there as well. There can be third parties involved. And so that's something I've been working on behind the scenes. You know, long-term play.
Yeah. Which is what we need right now.
Yeah,
We need.
if there was something more that was really significant, make more money, I'd probably already do it. I will say though, that, you know, local market changes now. I mean, I've got my eye on it. And I can't always tell you how it might change, but it has changed. It kind of keeps me on the edge of my seat a little bit, because it's not business as usual. Things are changing. It's affecting their salvage sales. Those revenues are not going to be as much if they continue. And I don't get to control everybody that's buying me with. They get to set what they're going to pay. Fortunately, majority of our timber revenue doesn't come from salvage. Majority of it comes from our large sale agreement with the programs. 97% of it, and so, you know, salvage is more of just it's what you get as a bonus when you're managing timber. It's not even part of the allowable cut, but it's stuff that blows down, or insect kills, things like that, and it's also maintenance of your forest. So if you're maintaining it, you're going to collect a little bit of that before it rots, before it burns up. So, and so that's, but it's always been there, and that's also averaged by 20% as well. Actually,
Thank you.
Any other forestry related questions? No. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have one question I'd like to ask, and then I do need to, regrets, I need to leave at that point. I'm looking at the trend sheet that we got and wrapping my head around this. It's the replacement page 21 that we received in the meeting today. So I just want to understand, I'm looking at just some of the things that changed in the estimates as compared to the budget. So one of the places I see a change is intergovernmental revenue. And I see a similar scope change in capital outlay. About $1 million. That's not getting spent this year. Can you speak to that?
The capital outlay, I think, is predominantly now in the town hall, which just
Okay.
rolls forward. It's
Okay.
now in this year's budget.
Okay.
It's not-
And the amount on that is, okay.
The intergovernmental, I don't have as quick of an answer on that. Like I said, these are two data sets that are not merged
Sure,
together,
I
right?
understand.
And so I would have to, compare them. I'd have to
Okay.
piece them together, compare them and see what individually has changed.
Where does the money to support that Mount Hood Town Hall capital expenditure? Is that also shown in the 26-27 budget?
A lot of it's in the grant, so.
Yeah,
that's
it's an
probably a big
intergovernmental
chunk of
revenue.
that.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Okay.
most of it is grant funds.
Okay, so I guess
Small.
what that tells me is that this year's proposed budget at 3.2 million in intergovernmental revenue has close to $1 million of one-time money.
Yeah.
Coming in, that has sort of a mirror expenditure. I guess the one thing that catches my eye about that is that means that next year's budgeted revenues, if we take that out, are actually less than what we're seeing this year.
Most of the intergovernmental revenues have a similar outlay. Aren't those mostly basically
Usually-
pass-throughs?
They're usually for a specific purpose that we're either gonna provide as. The other departments to do a service or we're gonna cut that service.
They should be coming as matched variable.
It's usually, yeah.
They shouldn't be provided clear as that.
It just has an effect on the trend as I'm looking at it, which is what it tells me is if we've got a large one-time. Flow in intergovernmental and flow out in capital outlay of about $1 million. Means that next year's projected revenues, next year's budgeted revenue is actually lower. Than what the county projects to take in this year, if we remove that one-time $1 million
It's a grant, right?
grant.
Yeah, and that's what you will see over time in our revenues, depending on the grants that come in for a specific project like that, is you will see a matching revenue with a matching
Right.
expenditure.
ARPA was like one of the rare exceptions where it was like, didn't happen. necessarily.
And that's where the problem was, that all this money came in and it just sat there.
Right.
Waiting to unspool at the other end, and it took a while before we got there, and that was last year.
And part of the problem with that on the budget side was that it was like emergency funds, so it was kind of. Thought that we should have it available if we need it, because it was for an emergency. Even though we kind of had a little loosely held schedule of how we desired to spend it, so it showed up as being fully spent each year, even though. We probably weren't gonna do that this year. That's why it's so hard to track it and see it.
It's concerning to me that outside of a large $1 million grant, revenue for next year is actually budgeted to go down. Compared to the projection for what the revenue is gonna be this year.
I'm still not following because the expense goes down too. We matched. What's unmatched? If we, say there's a $10 million grant that comes along next year's budget. So we're gonna have a $10 million revenue, $10 million expense. Why do I care about that?
I guess I'm concerned about the trend of revenue over time. The trend of revenue as compared to what we're seeing with the trend in personnel and other expenses. So a year where the revenue is going down. Is of concern to me.
You can still have the personnel.
The revenue left to cover everything else after this Mountain Hood Town Hall project. Is less than this year.
None of this revenue could be used for payroll.
Right.
I think she's just saying that
Yeah.
you strip that out, that the trend is the wrong way, but then you look at this highly variable transfers in, and I mean, it's kind of.
Yeah.
I think we should probably just be looking at the top two lines as for the trend ultimately.
Yeah.
That's my view of it.
It could be, there could be similar noise across all kinds of other years in comparisons. That makes sense.
You need a bigger piece of paper.
All right, so I'm gonna depart.
Hey. Let's go. Oh my gavel.
Now we get serious.
Yeah. Where are we left in terms of our down the table run of things people want to discuss in particular? Or have we run that course?
Big unknown.
Oh, the big unknown, yes.
Well, I just trying to say, I don't feel like this is a good time in the meeting. We're supposed to end at 4, right?
5, I believe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What's that?
Or you can enter.
Yeah, I'm just feeling like I'm trying to get sort of to the heart of the analysis that we need to do, and I'm not feeling like this is, I think I better talk to Sherry a little bit more to get some data to back up my questions.
How, like, moving forward, do we want to kind of go department by department and look at each individual budget for the next couple meetings? I mean, how are people feeling on moving forward from this point though?
I'm feeling like, when are, you said that you were hoping that Baker Tilly could present something to us next meeting. I think that's gonna be tremendously, that's gonna probably tell us which direction we go.
And we went through the process last time, we had set up today originally to have department by department presentations, and so. Thank you for your suggestion of having video, so the departments are, narrating slides, so you'll have that available to you, by,
Since we talked last week, does staff have a good method to do that process to get those videos out? I don't get to the heavy lift, it just. It really could just be a recording of a Zoom call, switching to your screen every once in a while to show the slides.
yeah, I think they're essentially doing that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Good.
PowerPoint narrated, yeah.
So do you see Arthur? She's won't speak, but because the way I kind of see it is based on the presentation from Baker Tilly, that will help us form or at least frame the discussion of whether we feel comfortable with a transitional budget versus something more of a balanced budget or sustainable budget or somewhere in the middle, right? Is that how everyone kind of sees it?
I guess what I'm seeing is, I'm not sure if I'm gonna answer your question, but what I'm seeing is 7 years ago, we took actions which were supposed to create a sustainable budget, and a bunch of things happened. And I want to have a little bit of a discussion of the history of what happened and why it happened. But the result of that is that it's not sustainable. And we're now looking at discussing options which have been, which we believe have been generated by Baker Tilly for how to get back onto a sustainability path. But that's it, but that's going to be a long-term process if we agree with what options, if we agree with any of the options. I'm assuming they're gonna give us a whole bunch of different choices.
Sure.
But if we agree with any of those, any of them are going to require significant time. So we have to figure out how to bridge from today to there. I think understanding the history a little bit is going to be important, and hearing what the proposals are is going to be even more important. You can miss all of that. You could, India's not that big a time difference. You could-
1.5 hours.
So 3 a.m. That's no problem.
All right.
I mean, you're not the meetings there, are you?
Not 3 a.m. Well, apparently I am.
We're not gonna be meeting with clients, so I think you're fine.
Okay. You know what? You just may see me.
Okay.
I think,
Please,
yeah, I think it'd be great if you could be involved,
just make sure you have.
Thanks, Jeff.
even at 3 a.m.
Well, I don't have to turn the camera on. I think I was saying exactly what you're saying, right? It's gonna lead us down a path in a discussion of how we get back on that sustainability, and I'm sure there will be question marks as to how we get there, if it's revenue or cutting or efficiency. Those are,
I guess the area, so the reason I'm not bringing forward my question right now, and I talked to Kristen just a little bit on the break, it's unclear how much time we want to spend on looking at the history. If there's limited value to it, but there is some value to it. Public probably needs to understand what's happened, but it's not going to fix anything. We can't undo history.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to dive. I'm just feeling like I'd rather balance that against some actual proposals for where we can go.
Sure.
Which might happen next meeting. I don't know how it's all gonna come out, but that was my thinking. I'm not diving into the history today.
And then, Arthur, I would say, once you have that ready,
Yeah.
once it is ready, I would love to see it written also, if
Well-
it's available, because I just absorb it much better that way.
Yeah, so we have a bunch, Sherry and Clayton already gave us a bunch of material. And but interpreting that material, that's the narrative that goes along with it is what I'm trying to figure out. And I don't know, I'm right on this. I'm doing my best to analyze it, and I think it might be better for me to spend a little time asking them questions before we just have an open discussion and I start saying things and they say, no, you completely misunderstood that.
Well, but then once all that's hammered out, I would love to see at least some of it in writing, because it is easier for me personally.
I will think about writing an essay.
Well, no.
I would like pictures. Are there
No, no.
pictures?
A measure 5 and 50 essay, I think.
We already read my 5 and 50 essay,
Yeah.
and I did write, when we started the thing, I do have my introductory notes in the essay form, but I kind of think that way too, so I completely understand what you're saying. Yes.
I have all 26 audits open and ready for you on the table, my mom. Anybody want to come help? You're welcome to it.
This is what we did once before. Let's go through the stack of audit reports going back. I told you 15 years is all you need to do.
I did 26.
Okay.
Dear.
Overachiever as always.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure that we're still thinking the same date for the video deliverable. May 7th was what we had on our calendar. Is that still
That we can
acceptable?
say,
Mhm.
that's next Thursday.
Okay.
Anyone else have anything they want to bring up? Well, it's sounding like we're gonna recess pretty quick. Can I be really annoying and ask one final question?
This is beautiful.
Yeah.
It's more just with the trajectory of the personnel. So as I understand it, we have like 11 open positions currently based on the narrative in the HR section. Is that right, Karen? Something like that. Sounds about right. Was that sort of factored into our budget last year for personnel? And so we're just, is the jump in personnel only due to sort of FERS and not, it's still maintaining a hiring freeze sort of?
So the budget number that you have is for, all of the positions with the exception of about 4 positions being held open.
Okay, so 4 held open. So this 14.18 number envisions us hiring up to 7 folks this year.
I'm not, I think we can get you current, where we are with our current data. But
Okay.
to answer that question, most specifically are open or not. They're not. Yeah, they're not.
Okay,
And they are.
okay.
So hopefully what was that was?
The positions that are open, most of them are backfills or grant funded.
And the, our turnover rate has been averaging about 7%. So that doesn't necessarily equate directly to budget savings. But that's just a factor of what our history has been. I think in the last year, our turnover rate on some months has been high.
Okay. I'm more just thinking of sort of Arthur's analysis last week and talking about, well, we've taken all the low hanging fruit, we haven't hired people, and we still only see sort of a 600K reduction in the year end estimates versus what we budgeted last year.
No, that's not right. It's much more than that.
It's more, and some directors are, one of their ways to save money. We asked for certain cuts, was to keep positions open for some time.
Okay.
Some directors are planning on leaving positions open all budget year next year to meet the cuts.
So my note is that we budgeted a minus $4.1 million reserve impact, and we're now estimating a minus 1.6. So that's.
I was looking at just personnel. I'll dig into it and send an email and I'll save you all the time. So, everyone else happy to recess? All right, recess until next week. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.